is Namrita, and I'm a manager. I am a manager at Emerge. Next slide, please. So Emerge recently moved over to the Newcomb Institute at Tulane University, which is the largest gender equity institute in the world. Dr. Anita Raj, who's also here today, and I'll give her a chance to introduce herself. The PI of Emerge has recently become the executive director at Newcomb. And along with myself and Dr. Raj, I have my colleague Jennifer Cully here as well. So I'll just introduce myself really quickly and then hand it over to them to do a brief introductions. So as I mentioned, I'm Namrita. I am leading the Emerge effort on behalf of Newcomb Institute, and I am based in India. One of my roles and goals is to continue to build Emerge and the Newcomb Institute for a global audience. So I look forward to sharing more about Emerge as well as opportunities to collaborate and train with us as we go through the presentation. So maybe Anita, you can come on quickly and introduce yourself, and then we can have Jennifer do the same.
Sure. Hi, my name is Anita Raj. I'm the executive director at the Newcomb Institute. I want to make one small revision to what Namrata said. We are the largest academic institute focused on gender equity, which means, specifically as far as an institute within a university setting, we are the largest. We operate with about a $2 to $3 million annual budget. And so we are in a very unique position to be able to partner with people around the world with some financial security on our end to be able to participate without needing to find new grant funds, which makes this a really nice opportunity for us to be able to collaborate with you all and introduce you to our gender empowerment work and specifically the work we do with Emerge. Over to you, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Cully, and I'm a clinical research coordinator with the University of California, San Diego. So that's where Emerge kind of started, and we're still keeping this partnership between Tulane University and UC San Diego. So I'm still based over there. And I am working with Namrata and Dr. Raj, and we kind of the operations side and managing the operations in order to kind of meet these collaborative goals and to increase use of Emerge and create these partnerships. So I was here for this webinar about a little over a year ago. So I'm glad to be back and tell you about Emerge for those of you who it's their first time seeing and using the platform, and then kind of show you some of the updates for those who were in attendance last year. So looking forward to it. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Anita and Jennifer. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to do a very quick informal poll. How many of you all have used Emerge before? So you can use the chat button to just raise your hand so we can get a sense of who's used it. And for those who have used it, thank you very much. Please do share your experiences and feedback in the chat. We do want to know how you have used it, and we're constantly trying to improve on it and make it more functionable for all of you. So can give it a minute. And if you can't find the chat button, you can just if you can't find the raised hand button, you can just type it in the chat. And I will keep checking periodically. All right. So next slide, please. Okay, it seems like not very many people have used it yet. So I'm glad. We're very excited to share this tool with you. So for today, we're going to cover 3 topics. One is what is Emerge? Then we're going to go into the website and see how to use it for searching for measures of women's economic empowerment. And finally, we'll be discussing what the components are of a good measure. And this will include psychometrics testing, as Crispin had mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. Great. So I just wanted to start off by explaining why Emerge, how this came about. So one of the main motivators of Emerge was the gender data gap. We found that 80% of indicators of gender equity and empowerment did not have robust measurement. We really wanted to integrate gender equality into various global health and development verticals like economics, like more recently COVID even, but without good measurement tools and good data, that was obviously going to be a big challenge. There was a huge need to develop and use reliable and valid gender empowerment measures, and particularly from the global South. So we found that in some cases there are good measures, but we don't know much about the psychometrics. In some cases, good measures exist, but they're not used as much. In some cases, measures needed to be updated for the context. So Emerge really was a response to this global gender data dilemma. The Emerge website has over 900 survey measures that are freely available for use. Each measure is given a score on their robustness, and that's the psychometrics component. And we will get into detail of this through the course of the webinar. Next slide, please. We will spend most of the time today going through the website and understanding psychometrics, but I wanted to take a few minutes of your time just to share with you some of the work that Emerge has been doing globally. We have partnered with several large-scale surveys, as you can see on this slide, to incorporate or to pilot novel measures of gender empowerment. Most recently, we had a small pilot with the DHS in Uganda, and a 3-country survey on novel women's economic empowerment measures, including in Uganda and Kenya. There is a registration button on Emerge, which Jennifer will go through, but the best way to keep up to date with some of our activities is to register. So please do that. We have also been giving out small grants to researchers and implementers annually to develop or test or adapt measures. And through the years, we've focused on a few different key areas. One, of course, is women's economic development. There's been COVID. We've focused a lot on family planning and really thinking about how gender equity can be incorporated in traditional family planning programs. And also, we've been recently looking at gender in the environment. And we have dedicated web pages on these topics, and Jennifer will walk through them. Next slide, please. And as an academic institution, we really encourage our partners to publish their work. And that was, one of the points in the earlier slides. We do want, the work that has been done to be published in peer-reviewed papers to shed light on what is new, what is novel, what is working, what is not working. And through Emerge, we've published over 30 papers with our partners. And the sampling of papers shown here are all from our grantees, all of whom are based in the Global South. And we're really proud of this body of work. Next slide, please. So yes, we are very pleased and also very humbled with the feedback and support the Emerge platform has received. And we have users across the globe, and we hope to continue to build on these partnerships, develop new partnerships, and keep, adding to the website, definitely, but also keep continuing to be a resource for global development organizations globally. So now I will hand off to Jennifer to walk us through the Emerge website and deep dive into how it can be used to measure women's economic empowerment better. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to you, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you so much, Namratha. Okay, so the part that I'm going to talk to you today is a little bit slides, and then afterwards we're going to do a little bit of a live demonstration, and also going to ask for some audience participation as well. So I want to tell you a little bit about what Emerge is and as a platform, and how to get there, and how best to utilize it in your own work. So first, our website is emerge.ucsd.edu. I hope that's showing up on your screen there. That's how you can access it. And this will take you to our homepage right here. And I just want to first tell you a little bit about what Emerge as a website is. So it's a repository of measures for all different topic areas of gender empowerment. We currently have over 900 measures, but we are continuously growing. Our intention is that Emerge is a one-stop shop for those looking to use, adapt, or design surveys or other instruments in their work in any different topic area surrounding gender equity and empowerment. We also partner with institutes around the world and other partner organizations, NGOs, INGOs, kind of as Namratha mentioned, just in order to collaborate and think about how we measure gender empowerment. So when I was talking about these 900 measures, I'll show you, I'll pull it up live, but this is just kind of a demonstration of what we call our measures dashboard, which is where we show a live example of, or a live kind of repository of everything that we have. So you can see currently we have, and when the screenshot was taken, which I think was a few days ago, so it could actually even be different, there were 918 measures. But I wanted to show this page to show you the different areas that we work in, that we try to learn as much about different topic areas, work with what are kind of the hot topics that that are currently being discussed. As Namratha mentioned, COVID, we really tried to make sure that we were using a gender empowerment lens through kind of looking at COVID and using the measures that we had. But we do also we know that women's economic empowerment is a big topic of interest for this group in particular. And wanted to highlight that we do have quite a few measures in that. And just to kind of first also, because we'll be using a lot of examples from this area, just to kind of make sure that we're on the same topic, I'll just kind of show you what we consider our topic of women's economic empowerment, or WEE. We do use the OECD definition, and just to kind of make sure that, just to kind of show you what we usually pretty much use it as anything that's measures on women's access to resources and opportunities. So this is just some kind of some reading if you're interested in kind of seeing what we use here. And then I'll show you this as well, but this is our search function, which is really kind of the core of what we would like to present to you about how to use the website. If you've used our search function in the past, you will see that it has been updated recently, and we think it is much stronger now. So we hope that you take some time to kind of explore a little bit after we explore today different ways to search and find a tool that might be the most helpful for you. Okay, with that, I'm going to pause our presentation here, and I will take you to our website so that you can see what we're talking about and work through it live. So emerge.ucsd.edu, that is still our main link here to find our website. Right in the beginning, you'll see our search. So that is what we really want to make sure that you find easily. But we also have several other over in our list of tools over here. We have a lot of other things that you can explore. Our dashboard being one of them. So like I said, this is where we have a live update of all of the measures that we have currently on the website. So check this out. You can kind of filter by dates, by our different kind of tags that we call, or where they've been tested in multiple countries. If their measures are short, so if you're looking for something to use really quickly, you can kind of filter by this. So yeah, that's kind of our dashboard. We have, as Namratha mentioned, our special topics page, different pages that we highlight at different times, which contain modules or other publications by us. So if there's something of interest here, you can always find a special topics page. So we have family planning, WEE, COVID, norms, environment, things like that. Our resources page also here has some really great documents for one that talks a little bit about our strategy here over at Emerge, what we use for our scoring, for our selection of measures, all of that, which we'll go into depth in a little bit later, but also some of our guidance on how to, if you are teaching Emerge, you're showing someone else how to use it, then there's also some resources here. And then our frequently asked questions and our contact information. I will say that one of our most asked questions is whether we have a lot of people asking whether how they can use our measures and whether they can. All of the measures on our website are freely available and open access. So if you have, if you know anyone that's exploring Emerge or you want to use something yourself, anything on here is freely available. So feel free to use it in your own work. We just ask that you cite the original citation of where the measure came from, which I will show you where to find that. And as you'll also see, you can search from anywhere on this website. So we want to keep that search as top of mind as possible. So with that, I'll just show you a little bit about how to search, and then we'll kind of explore what some of the measure pages look like. So this is our search function. This is another reminder, everything is fully accessible, so feel free to use it. So there's two ways to search on our website. One is using kind of our drop-down menus here. These are if you have kind of a general idea of what you're looking for, or you want to explore a general topic area, or you have a country in mind that you want to select. So that's what one method of searching that we recommend. Or we have our keyword search. So that's if you have a particular keyword that you know you want to use. Maybe if you are looking for something a little bit more specific than some of our topic areas here. You can combine all of these two. You can select a dimension, a country, and write in a keyword. Your results might just, of course, be a little bit more narrow. So I'll kind of show you first an example of if we're going to use our drop-down menu. So let's see, we have all of our different core dimensions here. You can get as specific with this again as you would like. For example, we're going to start general. We will use women's economic empowerment, and then we'd do Kenya here. So we'll select Kenya, women's economic empowerment, and we'll search. And these are all of our search results. So these are some measures you can start out with. You can see we have some of our large scale surveys, so like the world value surveys, and then we have some other smaller instruments that may have been tested for validity tested. So you can kind of explore here, and all of our results are organized in best match. So the best match is probably what's going to be at the top, but we also say really scroll down. If you're seeing, this is a very large list, get a little bit more specific with it. So we could also put in here, we could say workplace and see what we found. So we've gotten too specific. So maybe if we want to keep looking for workplace, we'll take away these two and we'll see what we can get here. So now we're at workplace. So yeah, as you can see, you can get pretty specific with your keyword search. So I'm going to pull up a measure page to show you, now that we can find out how to get the results, to kind of show you what some of these measure pages look like and what we're working with. So once you select your measure that you want to explore a little bit further, you'll see that this is the landing page of each of our measures. We have a short description here, as well as our categories here, which is some of the demographics, which is age of our population tested, geographic region or country, and then the population, so it would be female, male, of those among which the survey is intended to be, or was tested, or in the case of large scale surveys, intended to be tested among. These are some of our tags here, which I'll kind of explain a little bit later, but this one we tagged as a high psychometric score. So still working with this left-hand panel here, we have our description, and then we have our items here. These are all the items that we've extracted from the instrument itself. So just to kind of make it as easy as possible to just see what are the items and how, just to get a little bit more specific in what you're looking for. So we have our items here. We've extracted our response options, and then our scoring procedures. So our goal with Emerge is to show for each measure as much possible information as we have about the measure, but not make any assumptions. So if, for example, we don't have these response options, we gave a suggested way of using the response options by giving a numeric value to each of our responses. The original paper that we used did not contain numeric response, but we've suggested what to use. But like I said, we never want to make any assumptions, but we want to give you some guidance in case you want to explore further. We do also say that any questions that aren't answered by our items here, or maybe you're missing some more information or would like to know more about details regarding the scoring procedures, we say right here is the original citation of which the measure was originally developed. So we recommend reaching out to the authors here. So pulling up the paper, finding the corresponding author, and reaching out to them here. So we're also trying to just connect the users of the measures with the authors of the measures. So that's our citation, and that's also what we will recommend or ask for those to cite when they use it in their work. And then, so that's our left-hand panel. So that's kind of the information about the measure. On our right-hand panel is kind of what eMERGE has scored it, as we call. So our psychometric score here is, as Anita will explain a little bit more, these are the different components that we use to kind of give a score to what we're looking for in the papers in order to score using our criteria and present here. So we use this based on formative research, reliability, validity, and then we'll go into more detail about what those mean a little bit later. But we give them different scores versus we can give full points, partial points, not assessed or not applicable. So if we give something not applicable, we're saying we don't want to, we want to factor that into the denominator, and not take points against that person. But all of this being said, this is our own criteria that we've created. So if this, we don't say this is the only way to view a measure and to give it a score, but this is the way that we do. And then we also have over here, so we have our psychometric score here, which is reliability, validity, and formative research. And then we have our ease of use score here, which is how easy is it according to our criteria, once again, to use it, which we use readability, which is about how the language, how accessible the language is, the scoring clarity, which is based on this information here, the scoring procedures. How easy is it for someone to pull this measure from the original paper and score it themselves? And then length. So I think it's any measure that's 5 items or less, we give it a full points for length. So that's our psychometric score and our ease of use score. And then here we have, we've pulled Google Scholar citation. So we have just a link here to where it's listed in Google Scholar. And you can see how often the paper has been cited by other sources in Google Scholar. And of course, this is updated constantly. So this is, if you want to pull it up in Google Scholar, pull up your own link here, as well as see how often it's been cited. Our newer measures, of course, or newer publications will often have less citations, but something just to kind of track and look at over time. So that is accessible here. So that's kind of the overview of a measure page. I'll show a few more examples and kind of show some more search. So we've seen one. Let's pull up. Let's go back. So we started with kind of a more general search. We just did workplace. We also we did a dimension and country search. Let's kind of combine some of our searches. Let's go back into WEE. And then let's put in workplace here. So this will kind of, as you can see, this shortened our list a little bit more. So now we're focusing not just on anything workplace, but women's economic empowerment and workplace. So for an example, let's use our negative acts questionnaire. Let's use this one here. And as you can see, kind of the topic area of this measure is workplace exposure to workplace bullying. So now we all know how that can kind of impact women's economic empowerment and ability to work and have access to resources. So that's just kind of an example here. This one was tested in Belgium. We have a lot of we have a lot of representation from different countries. So that's another thing to explore. But if you the measure may have been tested and developed in one country and then could have been adapted to another context. So if you're not finding through your search through the country, then we recommend maybe removing the country from your search and then looking at the maybe using the drop down and or the search here. And then I know that something that Anita's going to go over in a little bit later in the presentation is adapting your measures. So if you're not finding the measure that in your country of interest, or maybe doesn't seem very culturally relevant for your own population, then we'll go over how to adapt some measures. So that's something that we're going to circle back to in this presentation. So that's a little bit of an overview on our measures and how to find them. We're going to do a little bit of an interactive. I'm going to take us back to our presentation, and I'm going to take a little bit of audience participation. So if there are any search terms that you have or any recommendations of things that you want to try out and do in a live demonstration. So either you could add dimensions, any search terms that you have that come to mind, and countries, stick them in the chat and we'll do a few practice rounds and see what we get. So I'll give you a few minutes here.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So far, so good. And I think just like everyone else here, looking at it that you have over 900 measures, I think it's mind-blowing, and definitely we need to take time to go through the repository because there seems to be a lot. I've seen in the comment section, Kerry Marks has already run a test on the environment section and has given a nice comment on how to enrich that section. And I think this is what this is about, really getting to know what else is out there that can be included. Kerry, would you like to make a comment on what's going on? And anyone else who's here and who has heard the question by Jennifer? Otherwise, if there isn't, we could proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, sir.
Hi. Thanks for this. This is fantastic. I work at Global Affairs Canada in the climate finance section, supporting climate adaptation in sub-Saharan Africa. And we've been really making an effort to integrate gender equality. So I just wanted to point out that in climate finance, COP's happening right now. There's going to be a lot more money in climate. There's going to be an intersection of climate and biodiversity. So we would love to see more indicators, more work done to capture those worlds, climate change as part of environment, but also on its own, and then biodiversity conservation. I think there'll be a lot more demand coming forward, and I'm happy to follow up afterwards. Thank you very much.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. That is definitely an area that we absolutely have wanted to include more on the website. And just we know that there's great measures out there, so we'd love Kerry to help us make those connections and find those, and we will gladly put them on our website. Great, thank you so much. Are there any search terms that anyone's curious about? Any countries you want to delve into? Just to see some examples.
Curious about agriculture. Maybe you can search agriculture. Yes.
Perfect. Let's try that. Let me get out of our presentation here.
Yeah, remove the presentation and take us back to the site.
Thank you. Let's see. All right, we're just going to end the show here. Okay, perfect. All right, let's do agriculture. Perfect. Yes, we definitely have a wide variety of examples here in terms of agriculture. We have some of our the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, which we know is a widely used tool. We also have some nutrition measures. Any other suggestions of search terms? I know that you all probably, hopefully you all take this, where into your work and practice on your own. But if there's anything that we want to go through at this time, let me know. I'll give everyone maybe like 15 more seconds to see if we see any keywords. If not, then we can go ahead and move on. And I look forward to hearing what you all search on your own. Perfect. Okay, perfect. It says, looks like Mildred here has suggested time use, which is great. That is actually one of our dimensions. So you have the option of, if you want to scroll through and see if we already have a dimension on time use, then actually women's economic empowerment is at our bottom here. So we can see here, actually may have removed time use, but I guess these are all kind of in, things like unpaid care and work are definitely related to time use. So if you're not finding, that's a good example of if you're not finding what your dimension is of interest, then you can put it into your keyword search here. And here we have a wide variety. I know that is a big topic area of interest. So we have a wide variety of different time use measures. So yeah, as you can see, we have a lot of results here. So maybe some way to narrow that down would be then to select a country and then further searching. Great, and it looks like Crispin has recommended financial inclusion. That is definitely one of our dimensions. So we can also search here for financial inclusion. And then also, just as a side note, this little box here will remove whatever dimension you've chosen, and you can select multiple. So you can select multiple countries, and you can also select multiple dimensions here. So just as a side note, and we have lots of financial inclusion measures as well. Great. Two more things I want to point out before I pass it along. One is the availability of our scoring methodology here, which is on our tools, which has the different components that we discussed in terms of our psychometric scoring and our ease of use. So if there's anything that you want to review that actually will also come from the discussion that Anita is going to have, this is where it's housed on our website so that you can also refer back to it at any time. What is some more information on what is reliability, what is validity, how do we use it in our particular methodology, how do we assign points? So if there's any questions here, you can always refer back to that. That is under our research tab, resources tab. And then also, I know that Namratha mentioned that you can register for our website to stay involved with our what's the most up-to-date information, as well as how you can reach us and hear information. And on the bottom right-hand corner of our website on any page is our registration button. You just click register here and you can enter some information here. So I'd like to give everyone maybe about 30 seconds. If you want to start registering now, we'll give you some time at the end of our program, but as we're kind of getting into our transition, I will give you some time to register right here. So bottom right corner where it says register. And as you're doing that, I'm going to pass it along to Dr. Anita Raj, who is the principal investigator of this effort of Emerge as a whole. And I will get her set up as you are all registering. So thank you so much. And if you have any contact, our contact button is also here. So if there's any questions, any new measures, please reach out to us if you want to share. Thank you so much.
Hey, Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, great. So I want to take a second because I can see in some of the some from the chat that people are wanting to think about like fiscal policy and elements that may be more measured by administrative data. And I do want to speak a little bit to what Emerge can do and what Emerge cannot do. So when Emerge was developed, it was really developed as an instrument for one-on-one survey use. So it's really designed for an individual, a participant, a human participating in a survey. So something like the demographic and health survey, or a survey that you would do if you were evaluating a program in the field. Consequently, it is limited to what you can ask via survey. So I want to be very upfront about that. I also think maybe just taking a step back about what Emerge really is and what it isn't and why it was developed. So when we started the Emerge process, what we really wanted to do is, as Namratha mentioned, address this issue of the gap in gender data. We really were focused on surveys, and it came a lot from through Gates funding, bringing women and girls to the center of development. So there was a lot of interest and effort made towards these ideas of, well, we want to do gender transformative programming. We want to do gender empowerment. So I just want to highlight that when we created this, it was really designed to be rooted in helping people identify the measures as they relate to the issue of gender empowerment, which means it's not going to have every measure in here. It's not going to have measures, for example, if it's pretty proximally related to gender empowerment, something like time use, which we think is pretty proximal, it's going to be in there. But let's say it's about lying, right? How much do you lie, or how acceptable is lying? There's not really a gendered component. So I don't want people to overthink that they can get everything they need from a survey from this platform. However, if you're doing survey research, this is really designed to help you consider what measures are out there that can help you identify gendered elements or gender empowerment components that you can integrate into your survey. So know that, we're trying to build it out, but we don't want to say that we're doing too many things. Really think about this as useful for the gender empowerment elements of a survey that you would be doing with a human being. Okay. With that in mind, let's think a little bit about what kind of measures you can look for and how to think about using measures that are for your particular context. So let's start with just an overview of what we mean by a measurement. First slide, next slide, I should say. All right, so when we're saying measure, what we're really talking about in the context of a survey is typically items or questions. It's either a question or a statement. That's most likely what you're going to see. Something like a series of items, for example, on how do you feel about women in politics? How acceptable is it? How often do you see it? Are women who, what do you think about women who are engaging in this process? These would be like, you'd either ask it as a question or as a statement, and then you agree or disagree with that statement. But you can do something called a vignette, which is like a little story. It'll still have questions, but as opposed to asking you directly, what do you think about this? It'll be a story of some situation that happened, and it's like, well, what did you think about this person? Or what did you think about what they chose to do? So that gets people a little bit more leeway to not have to answer for themselves, but what they think might happen to others, which we can call a reflection. Or you can do a survey based on observation. Now, that's not usually what we're looking at. That's not going to be most of the items in our Emerge platform. But an observation in a measure, as a measure could be, you go to the bus stop and you just see how many women wait at the bus stop versus how many men. And that can give you an indication of, do you not see as many women that are actually participating or using public transport? Then there are other pieces, which are big data. Those can include things like administrative data. However, for what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about survey measures. So typically what we're talking about are things that we might call a scale or an index, where it's multiple items. We typically score them. We might view them as an indicator, which is like a construct, something that is an indicator like intimate partner violence can be an indicator that you're interested in. So it's a series of items that might tell you about experiences of intimate partner violence. I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but do people know what I mean when I say like a multi-item measure, and what's the difference between a measure and a scale, or is there a difference at all? Does anybody have questions about that? I know that's pretty low level, but I just want to make sure that the terminology we use is consistent. So do people know the difference between a scale, a measure, an index? I'm just going to wait till someone answers. Okay, I'm going to do another question. I'm going to ask people to put it in the chat. What's a scale? Can someone just write it in the chat? What's a scale? So I will give the answer because I'm not seeing anybody put it in the chat. A scale is typically it's used in two ways, actually. Sometimes we talk about a scale as the number of items in a measure. So like it's levels of measurement. Thank you, Crispin. And then other times it's actually the level of the item. So for example, we might call something a scale, a depression scale. That's a 4-item depression scale. It's the number of items. But what some people will call a scale is for an individual item, they're using how much do you agree that this happened, or how many days a week did this happen? It's your response pattern. So the reason I'm telling you this is because one of the hardest things about measurement research is different people use different terms for the same thing. I'm not going to use the term scale at all. I'm going to call it a measure, and that's going to either be a multi-item measure or a single item measure. And I'm going to use the term measure to say that it's designed to give you an understanding of a given construct. So let's take, for example, sexual harassment. I could ask you, have you had an experience of sexual harassment in a variety, like by asking one by one? Have you had an experience where you have been leered at or made to feel uncomfortable in the workplace in a way that makes you feel sexualized? Has anyone touched you inappropriately in a workplace? Has anyone put up drawings or left things out that were of a sexual nature that made you feel uncomfortable? So you see how that's like a series of different items? That would be a measure, but it's all sexual harassment, but it also could be one single item. So when I say a measure, I'm talking about one construct that you're trying to understand either through multiple items or one item. Okay, so why that matters, typically, to be able to get an understanding of a construct, we're going to want to use multiple items to get at that construct. So we have to have some real clarity about what the construct is, how do we measure it, and how do we make sure we're measuring what we think we measure. All right, next slide. Crispin and Sarah, if I am going too fast or too slow, please let me know. Okay, so this is what I was saying before. So you can talk about it as an item, as items. So this is a single question that relates to the construct, or as a scale, which you could think of as multiple items. And I don't like the term scale because I think sometimes it's about responses. So I want you to think of it as either one item or multiple items. And when you have one item, that's just your one item, that's your variable. If you were doing an analysis, that's your variable, that's your construct. When you have multiple items, which we could use the term scale, but I prefer a multiple item measure, we are trying to get at a single construct by asking it in a variety of ways. Typically, we'll do that because it's a better way to assess a construct. It gives a little bit more room. You're more likely to get endorsement of a behavior, for example. If I ask you one question, Have you experienced domestic violence? By domestic violence, I mean having been physically or sexually abused by your partner. The likelihood that I'm going to get a yes on that is much lower than if I say, sometimes there are fights in relationships. Has any of the following ever happened? Have you ever been slapped? Have you ever been hit? Have you ever had your hair pulled? If I suddenly start asking you all those items, then suddenly I'm more likely to get a yes, which is why we tend to do multiple items. Next slide. So if you want to be able to do multiple items, you've got to have an understanding of how to make a multiple item measure that actually has good psychometrics, that is actually like what we would say is a good measure scientifically. And this is very important because one of the struggles I think we have had in social sciences is oftentimes people will say, oh, they just say that, or that's not really, I don't really know that I can believe those data. And what we want to do within social sciences is make sure that we have the statistical and conceptual framing that we need, the statistical support and the conceptual framing we need to be able to say, no, what we asked, they are answering in the way that it was intended, and we are seeing the effects we would have hypothesized. So let's go through the process of knowing how to do that. We talk about it in Emerge as 10 steps to make a good measure. So I'm going to go through these really fast now, and then I'm going to go through them one by one. So first and foremost, you have to be very clear what construct you want to measure. If you don't have that clarity, if it's not really clear in your mind, it's not going to be clear to the person, and it's probably not going to end up being statistically sound. You want to have that clarity and then get the necessary research from the people who are affected by the issue, or the people that you are working with, to have an understanding of the language they use and the experiences they have to capture that construct. Based on that formative research, you will start to create items that try to clarify that construct in a meaningful way. You have to then take those items and make sure that they're all being asked in a similar way, so that you would be able to collect them as a body of work and analyze them in a way that's meaningful. We often will have experts come in, look at our items, make sure that they have, they understand the construct we're seeking to understand, and they're looking and they say, yes, I can see this construct in the way you've written these items. You really want to make sure that the items you have make sense as a group. And then you want to take them, now you've kind of had that expert and understanding of it. Yeah, this makes all sense to me in my research lab, but you actually need to go back out into the community that you want to work with and make sure it makes sense with the populations you're trying to work with, because ultimately it's their answers you need. You get that feedback, you test it, you see, does this work? You make sure that you are not wasting people's time. One of the things you'll find when you go through Emerge, there's some measures that are 46 items long. That is really long in the field. And so many times we're trying to get a variety of constructs in our survey. There's so many things we want to measure. Can you really take 46 questions for one construct? So really think about what that length of measure is. How many items is it? Then you want to be able to, once you get that measure where you want it, in terms of, it makes sense, it's asking what you've got experts and you've got the community members saying, yes, this is asking what you think, and yes, the way you're asking it makes sense. You need to go out, you need to test in the field, and you need to do the statistical testing of reliability and validity to make sure that it actually holds up. All right, now I'm going to go through these slowly one at a time. All right, clarity on the measure. You must define it clearly. And oftentimes what I think is really helpful is to go to theory, go back to theory, go to the literature, really be clear that the construct is something that you understand, that the theory would say is meaningful for the issues you're trying to understand better. For example, I want to understand mental health. I want to ask about depression. Well, this is great, but one of the first things you can do before you ever work to create a measure is make sure that there isn't a measure already in the field, because there are good measures out there. Is there a good depression measure? Yes. Is there a good depression measure that has been tested in a variety of national constructs and a variety of populations? Yes. Is there that good measure that has probably been tested in your population? Probably, because there's a lot of good depression measures. This is more for when you have a measure that's relatively new. So I can take something like climate. I'm glad that one got brought up. So Carrie brought that up, and it's an area where we just don't see enough measurement. One of the kinds of ways you can ask about climate is certainly climate exposures, but you can also have climate fears. So that's an example of something that's a bit more social. Climate exposures is direct experience. Something that is a climate fear, it's going to be cognitive. So how do you capture that? You're going to have to really do some probably good formative work, because what climate fears may be, that's a really new topic area. And it may be very different depending on the population. So if you're trying to understand that, in particular, if you're going to try to understand that from a gendered perspective of like how women's fears, what they may be fearing around it, you are going to have to do some pilot work. But very clearly, what aspect of fear, what aspect of climate fear do you want to measure? Next, yeah, actually, before I go through, I just want somebody to put in the chat, and I will wait, a construct you would like to measure that you don't think there's a good measure for. Just to sort of see, is there a good, do you understand the concept of a construct? And if you don't put one in, I'll start calling people by name. So I'll just wait here. Okay, Sarah, can you think of a construct of women's economic empowerment that you wish that you had a good measure for?
Yeah, in fact, I was typing it out. I think what I've been struggling with in the last couple of weeks is whereas, there are quite some measures around women economic empowerment, and still there are quite some measures around SRHR. But that intersectionality, like where you want to maybe collect information around that intersectionality, I think that's a place that I've been thinking about. I've not been successful yet, and it's actually one of the things that I wanted to check. Beyond looking at all these topics and areas independently, is there a way that Emerge has also now started to begin to think around those intersections?
Yeah, that is a great question, because we do know that there's a correlation, right? We know there's a correlation between contraceptive use and contraceptive attitudes and women's employment and attitudes towards women's employment. But you are correct. I have no measure I'm aware of that actually draws the link. I only see how it's correlated between the measures, but something that's measuring, for example, the utility attitudes towards the value of contraception for women's employment, which is a really good question. And Namratha, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, can I respond to Sarah?
Please.
Yeah, so this is actually something Jennifer, Kali, and I were also trying. So one way we could search on Emerge is to restrict the dimension to women's economic empowerment and then use the search term like sexual or contraception or family planning. That doesn't mean there are measures, because I'm searching now, it's very few, but that is one way that you should be able to look at it, or vice versa, like in the dimension of health, and you search for, workplace or something like that. But once measures come in, I'm hoping that we can find these measures at the intersections of what are seemingly, siloed themes.
Yeah,
Thank
Sarah,
you.
I mean, to my knowledge, I can't think of anything. So I think there's an opportunity. And then I think also that there might be those measures. And so the ways that they're doing it now, maybe they can share those with you. Another one that I know is coming out is there is like climate fear and depression. Those are kind of two separate areas. Those are not specifically gender related, but I know there's a colleague I know in Canada who's been trying to get at this issue of climate depression, as he's calling it. And that's really, really good. So that's a really good way to like think about a construct. So nice, very nice example. Next slide. So then you want to do formative research to understand that construct and potential items. So next slide. So formative research is oftentimes people think that you go straight to the qualitative, but one of the things I think is really important is you start by just understanding where is the literature on this issue. And so I think you've got a good example of an area where people have really spoken a lot about this intersection of women's employment and women's contraceptive choice or reproductive control. That there's a wealth of literature around it. There's good theory. Theory makes sense that it's there, but how to measure it, if there's not a measure, you would then also need to look at the qualitative data, collecting the data from populations of interest. And I think of qualitative research as what is really hypothesis generating. It's trying to get a feel for how do we understand this issue of the intersection? How do the women in these communities understand that intersection? And can we draw out from them the language that could be used for the questions? Now, one of the things that I think you always have to remember is when there's not a survey that's been done in the field, you can't oftentimes, I mean, some studies do this, but oftentimes you're limited in scope. And so you're really drawing your first measure in a small area. It's just one community, or maybe it's one state even, but it's maybe, or one sub-national region in a nation. So that's okay. It still counts. The body of evidence will sometimes have to form to be able to make a measure that is robust enough to be used across populations, but there always has to be a place that you start. So again, literature review, theory, and qualitative research all count as formative work to help you clarify what is part of this construct to create those, to start generating those items for your measure. Next slide. Okay, so then once you have that, you've got to start making those items. That is lab creativity, honestly. When we've done it, we just start making the items. One of the hardest things I think is that sometimes, for me at least, I find it much easier to make a measure that is related to experiences or behavior. I find direct behavior measures much easier to do. So for example, if I want to measure something like sexual harassment and I make a set of items of types of experiences of different forms of sexual harassment, that is a lot easier for me to do than something that is attitudinal. So, or something that's normative based. So I'll give you an example of a norms item we did. We did a norms item on women, views of women as elected officials. So we wanted to get a feel for how, what the sanctions were, what people thought of them. We really had to kind of go through and think about all the items. That was a place where social norms theory was really helpful to us. So that's one of the reasons we always say go back and fall on the theory, because it can help to just make sure you're kind of considering all aspects around a construct. Next slide. So the only thing I think is an add from what I've already said is that too many items is better than too few at this stage. Remember, at one point you're going to want to cut it back, but right now, the more the better, because you're going to throw out items. There's going to be items that just don't make sense to people. So you really want to be thoughtful. Next slide. As you develop items, one of the things that you really want to make sure of is that they're simple, because the more complex they are, the less people are going to understand them. And for those of us who work in multiple countries or in multiple languages, it's just really hard to translate. So again, this is, you know, when you're making these items, keep them short, keep them simple. Reflection is harder. Experience is either easier. It is easier for people to comment on what they think than what they think others think. It is either easier for them to comment on what has happened to them than it is to comment on what they think. What they think is more likely to be affected by, you know, social desirability or other aspects than what experience they had. And so it's going to be in particular important to really have a number of items on what they think so that you can capture the variance in that. Okay. And then you definitely want to keep your items. When I say simple, one of the things is something like, you know, you just like, I had a question in a survey that I wanted 2 questions and they made it into one. I wanted the question, have you felt disrespected in your experience with a health provider? Yes, it is important to include cultural sensitivity. So one is, you know, I wanted to know, did you experience disrespect? And then the second question was, have you experienced abuse in the form of slap? You know, so it was like physical abuse from a provider. They put those into one question when they went into the field. I didn't know until it was too late. I cannot tease those things apart. They're very different things. Now I'll never know, you know, it probably is more disrespect than direct abuse, but it would have been nice to know if there was contact related abuse. So never want to do double barrel questions. Next item. Next slide. So decide on the measurement format. So since Patricia brought it up, let me see. How can I authenticate information of historical climate and not from reviews? Okay, that's a harder question, Patricia, but I do want to say that cultural sensitivity. So one of the things about cultural sensitivity is I think there is a real danger in what we have historically been having, which is teams from the global north creating the surveys that get used globally. I think even teams from the global south doing it, you still run this risk, right? Because you can be pretty far removed from the setting. So one of the things I often advise people, particularly with regard to cultural sensitivity and contextual considerations, is to be engaging field teams in item development. That's something I really believe in, because oftentimes it's the field teams who are actually more generative in understanding a concept, and especially if the field teams are the ones who collected the formative research. I think that's a group that's usually really great about knowing the items and not losing sight of pieces that came out of the formative research that are nuanced. Okay, so just as you want to keep your items simple in your measure, you also want to have the way your response pattern is. You want to have that simple. However, so let's say I ask a question like, I want to do attitudes, and I want to do attitudes of acceptability of sexual harassment in public spaces. So the easiest thing to do is like, how acceptable is it when in your community? How acceptable, this would be more of a norm question, I guess. How acceptable is it for a boy to shout out to a girl he doesn't know on the street? How acceptable is it for someone to touch, you know, for a male to touch a female he doesn't know as she's walking, to intentionally touch a female he doesn't know as she's walking through the street? How acceptable is it for him to touch her in like an area like the breasts or something? So you're trying to get at all these questions, right? If I say how acceptable it is, and I just say it's acceptable or unacceptable, right? The likelihood of everybody just saying it's unacceptable is pretty high. So you're not going to get variation. But if I say very acceptable, somewhat acceptable, neither acceptable nor unacceptable, somewhat unacceptable, very unacceptable. Now I'm more likely to get some variation, and I'm more likely to pick up that this is actually a concern that's arising. So you really want to think about your scoring formats from that perspective. At the same time, I know people who do the DHS, Demographic and Health Survey, and they say, listen, they're just going to go yes, no. They just want to get through it, and it's a really long survey, and we want to do yes, no. So you really do have to decide what's the nature of the type of question you're asking, what's the nature of your population. The older they are, it's a little easier to go with a greater variation in your response. The younger they are, the less, the more you're going to have to do a yes, no. And then you really want to make sure that as you score it, you want to decide, do you want to give equal weight to every item in your measure? For example, if you did a study on, if you did a measure that was on violence, do you want to more heavily weight if they're forms of violence that are that increase risk for death, choking, pulling a gun or a knife on someone? Like, do you want to weight those more heavily? So you want to think about the way you want to create your responses and how you score them. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example about different ways to measure decision making. So these are some DHS items. Oh, I don't know what that was. So who decides how the money you earn will be used? Is it mainly you, mainly your husband, you and your husband jointly? So that's like 3 different items. But something, do you have any money of your own that you alone can decide to use? That could be yes, no. So these are different responses that you could use. The problem can become that if you ask these and you want to make them into a single measure, but you ask different responses, and it's very hard to make that into one measure. To make a measure, you're going to want to have the same response patterns across each question. Next slide. Okay, once you create your items and your responses, you want to have experts review the pool. Now, so far, you've been pretty internal as you've been making this. You've been working with your community partners. You've been working with your RAs and your staff, but it's pretty internal. This is a bit of what we might call external validity. It's kind of an external validity check. This is where you start to go to your colleagues or other experts in the field and say, this is kind of what we've been creating. Now, I've been invited to do this before, where people have said, Anita, I'm going to give you some cards, and this is the construct we're trying to get at. Can you sort the cards into what you think is part of the construct and isn't part of the construct? And they'll go to a bunch of people who have some understanding of the construct, and they'll ask you to do that. And so that's a way to get expert item review, but there's many ways. You can just have people look at it. Next slide. Okay, I don't need to, I can move back to the next slide after this. Okay, then once you get that feedback from experts, and experts can be so helpful because they can oftentimes not just tell you things like, I don't think that that's the right, and I don't think that's hitting the construct, but sometimes they'll tell you things about like how to measure certain things in the field. I'll give you an example of this. I was going into the field with a depression survey. And one of the things, and I had been working in India a good bit, and we were going to work in Afghanistan. And I had a colleague that I was talking to, and I was kind of going through the survey with them and stuff. And he said, we didn't have success with this depression survey because it has a heavy emphasis on issues of things like suicidality. And there's so much stigma within the Afghan Muslim culture around some of that stuff in a way that you don't quite see in India, that the measure just didn't work. So these items are maybe going to be a problem for you. So that's like very helpful to get feedback like that from experts. Okay. Decide on inclusion of validation items. So then you want to really think, okay, now you've got your items, you've gotten some feedback on them. What do you want to actually have in your measure? Now you've created your items. you've created your responses, you've selected the items, you've drafted your measure, you're ready to go into the field. Next slide. So we're going to want to administer the items for cognitive interviews and pilot testing. Does anybody know what a cognitive interview is? Please raise your hand if you know what a cognitive interview is, or have you ever done a cognitive interview? Yeah, so I think, Crispin, you're absolutely right. So it's like you ask them the question and then you get their like, how did they understand that question? How did they understand how did they understand the response? How did they come to their answer? A cognitive interview is not just getting that kind of qualitative feedback, though. It also lets you see how long does it take them to come to that answer. So what you're trying to get at is clarity. I mean, most particularly clarity and comprehension, but also just like, how is it running? Is it manageable? You just want to get that kind of feeling with the pilot testing is just generally, is it able to be implemented the way you think it's going to? Is it taking too long? And then on top of it, are they understanding and responding in the way that you had intended? All right, next slide. Okay, so for cognitive interviews, typically you want to have 10 to 20 participants, and you really want to understand that you're getting what you thought you're getting in asking those questions. You then want to take about 20 to 30% of your sample, of your full study sample, and pilot test it. You just want to see if it's actually, like, a cognitive interview is more qualitative in nature. A small pilot test would be more like, you wouldn't have enough of the numbers necessarily to get the reliability and validity, but it does tell you, like, how can you implement this? Is the survey actually working? Is it too long? Is it hard to get people to participate? Are they leaving early? Are they left, having a lot of items that they're just not answering? As much as you can, you want to figure that out before you go into the field and do it at scale. I think many of us have had the experience where we've taken something into the field at scale only to find out we have wasted their time. And actually, to be honest with you, it was one of the reasons I started wanting to do this work. I really feel badly when I waste the time of the participants who very generously give their time to us. Next slide. So now you've got some pieces back. You want to evaluate the individual items of the measure. You want to see how the measure was performing based on your pilot testing and your cognitive interviews, and then make some decisions about which items you want to keep and which ones you want to get rid of. Next slide. Then you want to optimize the length of the measure. Next slide. What that basically means is practically, it may, you may have a variety of items that you want to be able to get to, that cover your question. But honestly, your measure is not going to be widely used. And your survey is going to get to be too long if your measure is too long. So you definitely want to think about a reasonable number of items. Now, one thing to remember that I'm going to talk about internal reliability in a minute. It is very difficult to statistically have good internal reliability the smaller the number of items. So just really think through how many items you need to capture your construct. Next slide. All right, let's go to reliability and validity testing. Okay, so reliability is really about how consistent a measure is, both in terms of its internal reliability, which means that, for that person, do you see that when they're answering the questions across your items, items are very well correlated? That's a good sign. That means it's capturing a single construct. It's something that's kind of related to each other. All the items are very related to each other. We also can think about test-retest reliability, which is you give somebody the survey and then you give it to them 2 weeks later, do you see similar answers? Because it's just, that's also, you shouldn't change too much in 2 weeks. Like if you did it a year later, there's a reason you might see different answers. But in 2 weeks, does it look pretty comparable? Then, it shows that, like, yeah, this is, people are answering it the same way over time. They're understanding the questions in the same way. This is all capturing something very similar. External is that repeat. I'm so sorry. External reliability is that repeat consistency. So then validity. So you can have something reliable, but it's not valid. So an example is you are capturing a construct. So there was a scale called, what was it called? Let's say you had a scale and you were like, okay, well, I'm going to try to measure self-efficacy. So what I'm going to ask is, so self-efficacy means you think like you feel capable of doing things. You feel like you have the capacity to do it. So I then ask a series of questions about, you feel good about yourself most of the time. You, when something goes wrong, you tend to think it's your fault most of the time. You feel that most people like you, right? So you start to look at those, and they actually, it's great. They all are very well correlated. That looks really good. Well, here's the problem. That's not self-efficacy. It's probably self-worth. So just because they're all hanging together well doesn't mean they're actually the construct you think you're measuring. That's where validity comes in. Content validity. Are you actually capturing what you think you're capturing? And you can test this in a couple of ways. Or in a few ways. One, you can get what we call face validity. That you look at it, it looks like, these are items that look like they are measuring the type of construct you're thinking. Then you can do construct validity. That's when it's related to what you would think it would be related to. So something like contraceptive self-efficacy. If, I believe I can get a contraceptive if I needed it. I believe that I could have used a contraception, if I got it. I believe that I could find out or I could get more information to learn about contraceptions if I wanted to. So these are contraceptive self-efficacy. That should be related to contraceptive use. So that would be like construct validity. You would actually measure its association. Criterion validity, I'm not going to go into too much detail because there's some dispute in the field about this, but typically we want to think of criterion validity is if there is an existing measure that measures something very comparable, that those would be related. So it's really construct, criterion validity are really like you're looking through association analyses to see if they in fact are related to similar constructs or constructs you would expect them to be predictive of. Okay. All right. Does anybody have questions on reliability and validity? I'm so sorry. I hope I'm not boring you to tears.
No, Anita, you are not. It's actually coming out very, very well. I want to believe that the team online is following, and I think it's important to hear from you guys. Is it making sense? Is there anything, something new you're getting? Is there a concept you're missing? Is there an understanding that you've had that has been validated? I think it would be glad to hear voices. Vivian, Mildred, Lynette, Josephine. It would be great to hear whether we are flowing together. Just Patricia. Are we there? Just double checking. I know you're there, but just double checking. And go on.
I fear that they are tired. It's
okay, someone is
okay.
saying step number 8 and 10.
Okay, so
something
can you
was
go to the
missing,
next slide just so I know where I am? Okay, conduct the field study. Okay, great. Okay, yeah, can you go back to the slide before? Okay, slide before. All right. Oh, right there. Okay, so just 8, perfect. Evaluate the individual items of the measure. Okay, so all that means is once you've taken the items you've created and you've reviewed them with people in the field, you've done your cognitive interviews, you've pilot tested them, you've seen with your client population, with your participants, you know, in the field, does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Do we need to tweak some of the language? After that, you look at your items with that feedback and you really make sure that your items are, I think of it as clean, that everything is as clean as possible based on the feedback from the field. That's what I'm saying when I say evaluate the individual items of the measure. Now you have the measure. You have, so I'm going to mention 9 very briefly. So 9 comes and you're like, okay, now I've revised my items because I've heard from the field that they think this is the best way to ask the questions. Now I have 20 items. I look at my 20 items and I look at them very carefully. And I think 20 items is a lot of items. I have about 6 items that are asking something pretty similar. Could I reduce some of those? You know? So I start to sort of see from my items, and based on the way people answer, let's say 90% of people who answer, so let's say like there's question number 8 and question number 10. 90% of the people answer exactly the same for question number 8 and question number 10. 90%. I probably don't need both questions. So I'll start to look at the items in that way to start to reduce the number of items I keep in my measure. Because I personally like to have no more than 8 to 10 items. Ideally, I'd love to have like between 5 and 8. That's really where I'm trying to hit. If I can get it down to 3, I know that I can make people very happy. And oftentimes when I have an opportunity to get into one of the really big surveys, they give me 1 item. So that's why I've been sort of on this bandwagon to help support researchers as you make the measures to keep them shorter, because oftentimes you're forced, and if you want your measure to have the ability to go to scale, you often have to get it down to 1 item. Okay, so let's now go to reliability and validity testing. Okay, so this is where you take it and you do it with at least a few hundred people, and you start to do the statistical testing. So the reliability and validity, a reliability test, typically we do a Cronbach alpha for the internal. You take the items and it's just how much those items correlate with each other. That's all it is. It's very, very basic kind of test. And you get a good alpha. You want to get at least a 0.7. And that tells you that these items, we call it, hang very well together. I'm not going to talk about factor analysis in this, but we do sometimes do factor analysis, and you can email us and we can send you a paper or something if you want that level of detail. But Cronbach alpha, internal reliability. External reliability is that test retest. And to be honest with you, a lot of people don't do it because it does take some resources, but it's a nice feature. If you're really trying to make a good measure, it's good to have a test retest. Again, reliability says the measure that you have, those items all relate well to each other. They are, they relate well to each other. But what you don't know is if they're measuring the construct that you think they're going to measure. That's where validity comes in. And validity, just in the simplest way, validity you can tell based on, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So there's a little bit of just looking at it, but then also looking at association analysis. If if you look at something like partner violence, and you look at something like marital quality, you know, people who are less happy in marriage are also more likely to experience violence, or more importantly, people who are experiencing violence in marriage are more unhappy in their marriage. People who experience violence in marriage are more likely to be socially isolated. So these are associations that I would anticipate seeing. But you can also, with an IPV measure, you can say people who report that they are being physically abused by a partner are also more likely to report that they're being economically controlled by their partner. So that's these association analyses. And that's where you do, again, you do the survey with about at least 300 people or so, and then you actually do the statistical test. Next slide. Oh, I'm glad you're not tired. I can't imagine. I find myself boring sometimes. So thank you for being patient. So at the end of the day, all of this matters because when you go to the Emerge website, I'm sorry, back to the other slide. Yeah, what you see on the Emerge website, when we say that, you know, we recommend it with having a good psychometric score, it's based on the fact that they did all of these things that we were talking about, or did much of the stuff we're talking about when they made the measure. And that's indicative of a really good measure. I know we go to conclusion, but before we go to conclusion, I want to bring up, how do you adapt a measure? All right, so everything I just told you was how do you create a measure from scratch. Most of you don't have to ever create a measure from scratch. I try not to create measures from scratch. I really like to use what's already been tested. I recommend you use what's been tested. However, sometimes you have a measure that's been tested and proven, but you haven't used it in your population. I will give you an example of one that I used years and years ago. There's something called the CESD. It's a depression measure. And I really liked the measure because it's only 4 items, and it was a really good measure of depression. I was actually not working in India, but I was working in the United States with Indian Americans. So many of the population of Indian Americans, they were immigrants, and so they came over as adults. And I was interested in the issue of domestic violence, so I was working with women. And I asked the 4 questions, you know, how often do you feel in the last 2 weeks, how many days have you felt sad? How many days have you felt hopeless? One of the questions was, how many days have you felt blue? Can I ask you, in your countries, do you use this term, feeling blue? Could someone please answer? No, not at a grassroots level. So if I said, are you feeling blue? What would you think I meant?
Would it be a feeling of sadness?
Yeah, it absolutely. Well, the women didn't know, and they were like they literally thought the color blue, and they were completely confused by it. If I would have pilot tested it, I would have known. So the thing about adapting a measure is that's where you can take it and you can do a cognitive interview to understand if it's going to fly or not. But sometimes you don't have to do a cognitive interview. If I had known better, that was early in my career. If I had known better, I wouldn't have used that one at all. So to adapt a measure, the way I would typically do it is I would do it with my field team. I would look at it with my field team and I would say, okay, for these items, what do you think, you know, how do you think they're going to be understood? And usually the field team, or we'll have some idea, this is not going to come the way we think it's going to come. One example of that is there was a very long survey, like 40 items on intimate partner violence. And it was all these questions about, have you been hit, slapped, pulled hair, humiliated in front of others? But there was one in particular, forced to use a did your partner refuse to use a condom when you wanted it? it was misinterpreted on almost everyone. We got no other answer yes, but just on that one, like if women who would not indicate any other type of abuse or mistreatment, they would say yes to that one thing. And we realized that the interpretation of that was he doesn't like condoms, which is not necessarily indicative of it was an abusive situation. He refused and it was like, and forced it like a forced sex situation, which is what the purpose of the question was, that there was a forcing of sex without a condom. But they were just answering as he didn't want to use a condom. And we realized it just wasn't getting interpreted right. We just threw the question out. And sometimes you just have to do that. So adaptation is one of those things you can do by first working with your field team to see that the questions make sense, and then doing the cognitive interviews. And then sometimes even when that happens, you take it to the field, and it's only after going to the field that you realize it doesn't work. So you do need to look at things statistically, just your basic frequencies to make sure there's not an outlier. All right. Any questions on adaptation? Okay. Before we go, I'm going to hand this off to Namrata, but before I do, I want to ask every single person to tell me what your favorite food is. And I would like you to answer it in the chat, please. I will put mine in. You can restructure the question instead of throwing it away. Let me restate. You should restructure the question before you throw it away. I only threw it away because we had collected the data. I had to throw the question out. Once you've asked the question and it's a bad question, there's nothing you can do. But Josephine, you have to also give your favorite food. I said food, but everybody is answering fruit, Emily. So please answer whatever you like.
By any chance, Anita, you know what pilau is?
Is it rice?
Yeah, rice with some either beef or pieces of chicken, or even a vegetarian pilau as well. Very nice delicacy with some spices.
Do you know how I knew that?
Tell me.
Because in India, we also eat pilau.
Yeah, and biryani, yeah. All right, yeah.
Okay, I will now hand it off to everyone else, but thank you for putting up with all this stuff. I know I appreciate your patience. It's quite an academic lecture, but I hope you got what you needed. And I will hand off to my dear friend, Namrata, to help close. And yes, it is food, and I am still looking at the foods that you are putting in.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you everyone for your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
This was great. So I just
see Emily's hand is up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and allow me to speak without my video on. And I really want to appreciate Anita for this presentation. It has really reminded me of some things. It's like a refresher for me, things I needed to know. And I really loved your examples on reliability and validity. So just a question, just for clarification. I saw on your second last slide, I think, that the psychometric score that you see on any emerge measure is based on use of the 10 steps. So does it follow all the 10 steps that we have gone through? Because I feel like, I don't know whether this is for every one of those studies that are on the website, or is it, did I get it correctly?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing because we may not, we use the term psychometric score, but psychometrics usually is very specific to reliability and validity. We use that terminology to actually mean that they went through the entire process. So it does, you know, basically we look to see if they did formative research, and that includes, you know, theory and literature review, qualitative work, field expert inputs, cognitive interviews, and then we separately see what kinds of reliability and validity testing they do. So that is our review of their publication. And so they may, they'll have that in the publication. Now, if they don't put it in the publication, we can't know. And so we can only base it on what they've published. But one thing that I'm very proud of with Emerge is that our 10-step request has actually made people include the information in their measures, including those of us from my own team, including me. I've now started putting these pieces into my papers when I publish them so that people know. And I like it because it sets a standard for the field. Oftentimes we do these things, we do expert input, or we do formative research, or we did a lit review, but we didn't necessarily say it in the publication that we had based it on all of that. And I think it's really good to raise a standard in terms of what, you know, we're writing in our publication, so that people know that there's a lot of rigor that goes into measurement development.
Thank you, Anita. Just a final question. I've seen some examples, I think one even on this, no, probably not on the screen, where it's indicated that certain, probably if I give an example of aspects of validity, where content validity was not assessed, or any other, for the different ones that were not assessed, what does that communicate, or how do you
interpret it? Yeah, it's a good question. So technically what we do is, if we can't, so we're very particular. We have a certain standard that the publication, it has to be in a publication, a peer-reviewed publication, where the journal is of a certain standard, or it has to have been conducted across multiple at multiple subnational levels or multiple countries. So that's kind of our standard. Now, there are some where I do something called a PI review. In an area, if there's a field where there is not enough research, then we're aware of something that has been done, just to make sure that there's something in the field that we can share with people, we'll go ahead and include it. Then periodically, probably like every 5 years, we'll review. And then anything that was, quote, PI accepted, we'll go back and we might take those ones out because the field would improve. So that's sort of our standard. Now, once they have reached that standard, they still might not have done content validity, or they still might not have done any validity. They may have just done the Cronbach alpha, right? So if that's the case, they'll have a lower score. You should take that into consideration. If it's the only measure that's there, it still might be a good measure. But it's not a well-researched measure. So we hand it to you with an understanding, like you're making an informed decision. It is not as well tested.
Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia, yes, you are absolutely, we're happy to share the slides. Namratha is at the home, so I know she will share it with Sarah and Crispin.
All right.
Thank you.
you
I'll
so
hand
much,
off now.
Emily, for that. Those were good questions. And thanks, Anita, for answering them comprehensively. And I think it's also for the benefit of all of us. I think, Namrath, you are next. You can
Yes,
pick
thank
it up
you.
now.
Yeah. Thank you, Crispin. Thank you, Anita, Jennifer, and all of you. So I just wanted to sum up with a few concluding thoughts. One, Emerge exists for your use. It exists for good measurement. There are a lot of measures on women's economic empowerment, as we saw, but a lot more can be done. A lot more needs to be done. The second point is, keep in mind the components of good measurement as you go through the work. Use the website, give us feedback. Please send us the measures that you have developed or adapted, because we do want to we do want to make sure Emerge is constantly up to date. There is a huge need and demand for measures developed in the global south. A lot of the measures we have on Emerge, have been developed in the global north, and we hope to be present, a partner, and a bridge to more measures that are developed in the global south. And like I've said before, we remain open to collaboration and training. The field of measurement science is still developing, and I think there's a lot to learn from each other. And we hope to continue to be participating in such discussions in the future. And I'd just like to, maybe we can go on to the next slide, Jennifer. I just want to list out all those people who have, before we do that, very important information. Use our platform, register with the site. There's a round pink button on the homepage that you can add your email address to receive updates from us. And you can always email us at the email address listed over here. Our doors or emails are open, to any kind of collaboration, feedback, and learning opportunities for us as well. And I wanted to just thank all those people who've been involved in Emerge backend. There's a huge list of people through the years. Not mentioned here are, the long list of partners, but this has been our core Emerge team. So I just wanted to thank them as well. And once again, thank you, ICRW, Sarah, Crispin, and all of you who have joined us on your early mornings, evenings. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We do have some more time, so I will be on if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer or just, chit chat about measurement. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who has managed to join in and stay through to the end. We have a few minutes just in case you have a burning question, or you have an observation, you have a comment, you have an idea, you have a thought that you would want to pass across. If there is anyone like that, you have a chance now. You can unmute, share your quick thoughts as we wind this up. But it's been on behalf of the team that is here, I want to thank each and every one of you for really managing to sign in. I know it's a busy period with so many activities happening, and getting 2 hours of your time, it's not always an easy thing. Looks like we don't have any further comments. So if you would want definitely this presentation and we don't have your email address, feel free to share your email address on the chat box, then we shall share it with you. I see Sarah's hand is up. Sarah, go on.
Thank you, Crispin. I wanted to speak on behalf of the WCOP members, just to say that this has been such a great session. And I know that all of us have learned something new. I personally enjoyed taking the trip through the Emerge platform, And I want to appreciate all the work that has gone into putting it into place and making it free and open access to researchers and all the persons who would benefit from all the measures that are there. When we first contacted Emerge, when we first had a connection in early 22, the platform had about 500 measures, and it's exciting to see how this has grown in the last 1.5 years to more than 900 measures, meaning, that's a clear indicator of how much effort has gone into building this resource for us. And so we appreciate so much the Emerge team looping us in and taking the opportunity to take us through it and, basically show us how we can benefit from it. And I'm sure my colleagues here from the WCOP have also enjoyed going through, even the steps for measure creation. I think that's where particularly we had most of the questions. And Anita, you were so gracious, to provide us with very realistic examples and contextualizing the steps and making them real to the work that we are doing in the field. So it's been great, putting this session together with you, Namratha, Jennifer, and Anita. Thanks for being available, specifically also to fit within our time zone. I know Jennifer was up by 4 a.m., so we don't take all that for granted. We hope that through this session, you'll be able to receive requests and the questions from members. And once we get these, we receive these, we will pass them over to you. For the members who are here, if you'd like to have maybe a more close, succinct discussion with regards to work that you're doing and perhaps measures that you're developing or would want to develop, we are available to connect you with the team to assist you in that. And most importantly is that we have recorded this session, so we will be sharing the recording with all of you and with all those that had registered. I think we had more than 60 registrants, but we received many apologies ahead of the session with regards to members being held in other engagements. So I would request that we stay connected, we keep this moving, we sign on to that chat box in the website and, keep the conversation going, ask our questions, provide any feedback, and we stay connected. So I would like to wish all of us a good day and thank all of us for participating, and a good evening to those of us who are closing our business day. Back to you, Crispin.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and nothing much from my end, but just also, thank you so much for those that are sharing their email addresses. We will pick them up before we close this so that we don't lose, and we shall share the presentation immediately. And just as Sarah said, the team here from Newcomb and Emerge at large are available for any further guidance. Nothing from my end, but just to wish you all the very best till we have another session again. Thank you so much, everyone.